All right, so there's been a lot of talk about Spain banning tourists. It sounds kind of wild, but
Mm.
we're going to break it down, like what's actually happening, why it matters, especially if you're thinking about a trip to Spain sometime soon. We're looking at this article from Country and Townhouse from January 27th, 2025, and it's called "Has Spain Actually Banned Tourists?" The three-year ban explained.
Yeah, it's interesting how one little policy can trigger a global reaction. It says a lot about what people are worried about when it comes to tourism and how it changes things.
For sure. So the heart of this whole thing is Malaga. It's on Spain's Costa del Sol. And they put this three-year ban in place on January 14th this year. But here's the thing, it's not actually about keeping tourists out.
Right, it's not like a tourists go away sign. It's really just about registering new holiday rentals, like,
Huh.
Airbnbs and those kind of vacation apartments. Hotels are still totally open, and you can book any existing place that's already registered.
Okay, that's good to know. So what's the deal with Malaga doing this? Is it all about making sure that locals can actually afford to live there?
Well, that's definitely part of it. When you have more and more places just for short-term rentals, it can really push prices up. And then it gets hard for people who actually live and work in Malaga to, find a place.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But is that all there is to it? What about all those complaints you hear about, like too many tourists and not enough resources?
Yeah, you're right. That's a big part of it too. Malaga is not alone, It's like
Mm,
a lot of popular spots that are dealing with the downsides of over-tourism. You've got packed streets infrastructure that strained pressure on everything, so this ban is one way to try and get a handle on that.
So it's all about finding that balance then between the money that tourism brings in and the quality of life for people living there.
Exactly. And Malaga's not the only one doing this. The article mentions how Alicante and Madrid already have similar bans on new holiday rentals. And Seville might be next. Seems like it's catching on across Spain.
So this isn't just a Malaga thing, it's bigger. But let's get practical for a minute. What does this actually mean for someone who's got a trip planned to Malaga? Can they even find a place to stay?
Oh yeah, absolutely. They might just have a few less options, that's all. The article said there are still over 13,000 registered holiday rentals in Malaga. So the ban mostly hits those newer holiday flats, the ones registered after February 2022, and the ones that don't have separate resources from permanent places. Those licenses are getting revoked.
So it's like making sure the rentals are good quality and registered right, not just about how many there are.
Yeah, could be. And it's worth pointing out the article talks about some bigger trends happening in Spain, too. Like beyond just this holiday rental ban, things are definitely changing in how they're handling tourism.
Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. What else is going on?
It's like this wave of what some people are calling like anti-tourism sentiment.
Yeah.
And it's not just Spain, it's worldwide. Like all these places are trying to figure out how to make tourism work, how to get the money from it without, ruining everything else.
So what are some of the ways Spain's trying to manage all this? You mentioned tourist taxes before. What's the deal with those?
Right, so like places like the Balearic Islands, think Ibiza, Mallorca, and then Catalonia, where Barcelona is, they've started tacking on this extra tax when you stay there. The idea is to use that money to cover the costs of tourism, like fixing up roads and keeping things clean.
Yep, that makes sense. But does it actually work? Do these taxes actually make a difference?
That's a great question. And honestly, experts are kind of divided on it. Some people say they're too small to really do much and that
Yeah.
they just end up hurting people who are traveling on a budget. But then others are like, no, this is what we got to do to make tourism sustainable.
So it's like trying to find that sweet spot again. And it's interesting because it's not just about like fewer tourists, it's about how they act too.
Mm.
The article mentioned something about Benidorm and a beach ban. That seems like it's about controlling behavior more than anything.
Exactly. Benidorm's known for its parties and nightlife rights, so they banned everyone from the beach between midnight and 7 a.m., trying to cut down on the rowdy stuff and keep things safe when there are no lifeguards. It's caused a bit of a stir, for sure. Some people love it, others think it's too much, but it shows how things are changing in terms of how they're managing tourists.
And then you've got Brexit, which just adds another layer to all this. The article talked about a new 100% tax on property for non-EU citizens, including Brits. That sounds pretty intense. What's the logic there?
Yeah, it definitely makes you wonder. Remember now, after Brexit, Brits aren't part of the EU anymore, and this tax applies to holiday homes. And even if you're moving there permanently, it's part of this bigger thing in Spain about controlling who owns property there.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But isn't 100% bit extreme? What kind of impact could that have?
It's a valid concern. I mean, it could make Brits think twice about buying in Spain, which could have a ripple effect on the real estate market, especially in touristy areas. It really shows how politics and economics get all tangled up with tourism. Decisions aren't made in a vacuum.
Right. And the article also mentioned that holiday homeowners might see their taxes go up in general. Wouldn't that just lead to higher rental prices for tourists? Wouldn't that hurt Spain's economy?
That's a good point. It makes you wonder who ends up footing the bill for all these changes. If it gets passed on to tourists through higher prices, it could definitely affect how many people visit and how much money they spend.
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't even thought about that. And then on top of all that, there's the whole visa thing for Brits now, that 90-day rule.
Exactly. Brits can only stay in Spain for 90 days out of every 180 without a visa, which is a big deal for British expats who've settled there. It creates so much uncertainty and red tape.
It just shows how complicated this all is. You've got local worries,
Yeah.
money issues, international relations. It's not a simple problem, but it is interesting to see how Spain's dealing with it all.
It is. And let's not forget, tourism brought Spain something like 126 billion last year. It's a massive part of their economy. So these measures aren't about getting rid of tourism. They're about figuring out how to make it work better for everyone involved.
I see what you mean. It's about finding a sustainable way to do it, something that benefits both the locals and the visitors. So
Yeah.
like tackling those issues we talked about, the crowds, the strain on resources, making things affordable,
Yeah.
and keeping these places feeling special.
Exactly. And this isn't just happening in Spain. We're seeing the same conversations and actions popping up in tourist spots all over the world.
Feels like we're at like a turning point, right? We've been
Yep.
talking about over-tourism forever, but now things are actually happening.
Yeah, I think so. It'll be interesting to see how these measures work out, long term. Do they actually do what they're supposed to? Will they actually make tourism better? I guess we'll have to see. Exactly. It's all changing. So for everyone listening, the main takeaway is that Spain's not like shutting down tourism completely, but things are different now. They're putting in all these new rules to try and manage things, and it's not the same everywhere.
Right. You got to do your research. Don't just read the headlines if you're planning a trip to Spain. Look into the specifics for where you're going. It'll save you a lot of headaches and make sure you have a good time.
Good advice. It makes you wonder, though, could we see these kinds of things happening in other places too? Places that are dealing with too many tourists.
Oh, definitely. It's possible as more and more places try to find that balance. Between the money and, keeping things good for the people who live there, we could see a global shift in how tourism works. It's a conversation that's only going to get bigger.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. Makes you realize that travel isn't just about checking things off a list. It's about connecting with places and people in a responsible way. And sometimes that means adapting to new ways of doing things. Absolutely. It's about being mindful when you travel, respecting the communities and the environment, and realizing that the choices we make as tourists actually matter.
So much to think about. Thanks for taking us through all this. It's definitely given me a new way of looking at the future of travel.
It's been my pleasure. It's a complicated issue, no easy answers, but it's a conversation worth having.
And for everyone listening, we want to hear from you. What do you think about all these changes to manage tourism? Are they necessary? Do they work? Let us know. And until next time, safe travels, everyone.